most of the industries were gone. Most of the jobs were gone. So there was a lot of panic. People had to adjust.
Mm.
Interestingly, you do understand those dynamics. You do understand things like black market, for example, why 1 USD equals to, let's say, 2000 in the bank, and 1 USD in the black market actually equals to 6,000, for example. And as an elementary school child, you know that if you have USDs and you want to exchange, you go to the black market. It's gonna sound as cliche as it is, but I told him I want to help people. Not every company is prioritizing recruiting and interviewing and spending a lot of hours into this. It's mendoksai. I joined Google in April. I had my marriage in May. After 8 months, I had my first baby. And I had to perform, and I didn't know if I'm performing well or not. Truly believe in myself again that I have a purpose. I made a decision. I want to come here and I want to be one of the best in this company.
All right, Andrey, thank you so much for being here with us today. After a couple of technical issues, we'll finally get it. Yeah, I thank you so much for being here. I remember our chat online. You were super kind to me. I remember asking you, hey, would you be interested in being on the podcast? Here we are. You have a lot more experience than me in recruitment. You've seen, the tech scene a lot more than I did. You have a super interesting background, so I'm sure it's going to be an interesting talk today.
Great, let's do it. I mean, thank you so much for inviting. It's an honor to be here. I see you have really amazing guests on podcasts, CEOs of the companies, and it's a pleasure to be here. I would like to share as much as possible, be honest and transparent. Hopefully, some of this conversation will be useful for the audience of InnoHyve.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Andrey. I guess before we dive into, the whole recruitment landscape, tell us a bit more about you, your background, your journey. It's not a common journey, so I really want to talk about that to start with.
Yeah, so my name is Andrey. I was born and raised in Uzbekistan. It's a country in Central Asia. At the age of 18, I decided to come to Japan. I applied for a university and I studied for about 4 years at Recruitment Asia Pacific University. That's in Oitaken, Beppu. Spent 4 years there, graduated. My dream when I was at college was always to work for a Japanese company. I wanted to really become a bridge between Japan and the rest of the world. I was a big fan of Sony, for example. I always had a dream that I want to represent the Japanese brand outside of Japan. And with that, I got into a Japanese company called Nissin Foods. It's one of the largest food manufacturing company, the company that produced cup noodle or chicken ramen. And I spent about a year there. I think that was really a big failure in my career because everything was just new. I wasn't able to adjust to a new corporate culture. I felt very lost and I was desperate to change. I think the biggest failure point was that I wasn't getting a lot of responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up basically cleaning the office, cleaning the warehouse, and making cup noodles for tasting. That was my main responsibility, and I felt that I could do more than that.
Yeah.
And at that point, I started losing a lot of confidence, and that's how one consultant who was trying to help me, who used to work at Robert Walters, I
How
was
did you
very
meet the? I mean, before we get there, actually, Andrei,
okay.
like you, why Japan? Because I
Sure.
really want to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
go there, and
Okay.
like you left Uzbekistan as well. Like, at what age? Like, because
Yeah.
you know,
I left Uzbekistan at age 18,
yeah.
and I decided to come to Japan because I felt Japan is one of the leading economies. I felt like there's a huge potential for me to go there, learn the language, learn the culture, and most of my motives were coming from probably socioeconomic
Mm-hmm.
motivation to come, adjust, learn, and succeed in that country, and become bigger than that.
Mm,
So that was the biggest motivation. I unfortunately didn't come. I didn't have an interest in particular, like into animations or
right.
manga and things like that. I had very, shallow knowledge of what Japan was. And it was the most beautiful decision I've made, because most of the times these days you think about decision making too much, that prevents you to actually make a decision. When you're young, you don't know
Mm,
much. You just make a decision and like it just feels
mm.
I want to do this.
How was life in Uzbekistan before you left? Because I think the reason I'm asking you this is I think in your bio on LinkedIn you kind of briefly go through
Yeah,
what you've been through, and I want to actually deep dive in this
sure.
first because
Yeah.
making a choice to leave your country at 18 is not a common thing, right? Like I left my country at 21 and it felt like a crazy decision, and I had very good in Belgium. But
Yeah.
like how was life in Uzbekistan? Like walk us through that journey actually.
Yeah, I think life in Uzbekistan was very interesting. It was very dynamic in a way that if you look at the history, we're a part of Soviet Union for a very long time. And all of a sudden, one of the biggest economies, one of the most stable economies of Soviet Union was collapsed. And in 1991, Uzbekistan, as one of the 15 republics of the former Soviet Union, decided to become independent. And early 1990s, there was a lot of instability in the country. Like most of the industries were gone, most of the jobs were gone. So there was a lot of panic. People had to adjust. There was
Mm,
a lot of change. So I think those first 10 years from 1990s to 2000s, it's adjustment period.
mm,
And then happily, the country was developing. It was bringing more like foreign investment, more companies were coming and entering. So things became a bit more stable. But
mm,
because I had that background, I saw that people's life were changing, that you really have to work hard if you really want to do well. There is no like opportunities coming to you. You
mm,
have to create those opportunities. And that's a mentality I had. That's what I learned from my mother, who, did her best to support the whole family of five. And
five.
when,
Wow,
yeah,
that's
so five people. She was a single mother. She's a single mother. We were living in a small apartment with her parents, my grandparents, myself, and my brother. So people of five.
how was life like as a because as a child maybe you don't necessarily understand like this whole situation of Uzbekistan. Like how did you perceive it back then? Do you remember that?
Interestingly, you do understand those dynamics. You may not understand like why economy is not doing well, for
Right.
example, and things like that, but you do understand. You do understand things like black market, for example, why 1 USD equals to let's say 2000 in the bank, and 1 USD in the black market actually equals to 6,000, for example. And as a elementary school child, you know that if you have USDs and you want to exchange, you go to the black market, and that was common in the past. So actually, you get exposed to a lot of things. And although kids are young, you may think that they may not understand everything, but I think I had a pretty clear understanding of what was going around, how people make money. Like there's this expression that my mom always used to tell us, and I'm pretty sure a lot of parents of my generation would agree. Parents would say, "I'm not printing money," and that would mean like you have to earn,
Mm,
and all of it is hard work. And when you see this, that becomes your value.
right. Do you perceive it as like how to say, maybe how to say the right word here, like do you feel like this is a blessing in a certain way as well to learn those values that early, even though the circumstances are not ideal? But is it something that you're like feeling lucky to have lived through? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I am lucky that I was able to experience like two sides of life. One side is when you are struggling, and you have to always like problem solve. And the second side, for instance, in Japan, I feel completely, blessed and very comfortable to live a comfortable life here in Tokyo.
Mm,
I think it's a blessing, but it also depends at how you apply that. Because if you are constantly thinking and living in the past, and you're thinking of those struggles, that may be challenging
Mm,
to live a comfortable life today if you're constantly thinking of your past. But if you are really utilizing that past as a strong foundation for you, as a mentality or as a immune system, whenever you have challenges right now, then I think it could be a strength.
interesting. I guess yeah, you grow like a stronger sense of gratitude as well for everything, and
Exactly.
yeah. When it comes to, I guess I'm from Belgium. Like life was really good there. Like the economy was very stable. I never been through like the crazy kind of inflation you probably saw, and but like how what did you learn that most people in my situation, for example, will not learn because they never face this kind of situations? Like how could you also like teach that, like your father,
Right.
like
Yeah.
your child, your children will, they're growing up here in Japan. How can you still teach them those values if they're not confronted?
Yeah,
um,
that's a great question. This is something me and my wife Yuri we talk quite a lot about how to raise our kids and how to expose them to different experiences. Your first question is how to um, what's the value, like what's the learning from having those experiences. I think when you have those difficult experiences from the beginning, you have to constantly think and problem solve. You have to constantly think about how you make things better around yourself. And what it teaches you is it forms a very strong sense of value. You start having your own beliefs because when you do solve different type of problems, not only like monetary problems, but different type of, let's say, social, economic,
can you give
uh,
me like an example, not
a
social?
good example socially would be, for example, let's say if you're not coming from a off family and you go to school and a lot of your friends are coming from a better
Mm,
economic background, like you start asking questions and why is this happening this way? And then you may find out an answer is simply because maybe your family is not doing great. Maybe that's because you only have one bread winner at home. And then you start thinking of how you position yourself and you start thinking about, okay, I'm having this feeling, but how do I get out of this anxiety, for instance, right? And then you start building other muscles. It could be academic background, or it could be maybe being more competitive in sports,
mm,
or a lot of different things. And I think that's what helps you to become really stronger. So
mm,
it teaches you a value and a belief. And I think that value and a belief becomes like your guide in life, especially
mm,
when you're lost and you don't know what to do. What I normally do is I go back and I look into my values and I ask myself what is truly important to me. And then I find an answer inside myself. And I think a lot of people probably do the same thing, but I always try to go back to these values and find an answer.
interesting. And then when it comes to like teaching those values to your kids, because like I'm a father myself, and
Right.
I know that those values are the ones that help people to really focus on growth, focus on being curious, improving the situation regardless of where you're
Yeah.
standing. Like, but how do you teach that to
Right. I
your
think
kid?
even before teaching those values to kids, the question I have to ask myself, do I want to be teaching them that? Is probably the first question. And if the answer is yes, the next question I would ask myself is to what extent do you want to be teaching? Is it just sharing those values with them and exposing those values to them, or is
Mm,
this really like an expectation them to follow you and become like similar to you? And the more I grow and the more experience I have with like kids, I think expecting them to be similar to me is not right. It's probably a selfish desire of me as a father to instill that idea into a kid so I feel more comfortable, more proud to be like completely objective. And being honest, I do have that too. I would
mm,
love my kids, for example, to be fluent in Russian. I would love them to speak and have values similar to me. But the reality is they're living in a very different world. The environment that they have in school is quite different. And I think life will bring challenges to them too, regardless me telling them about
Mm,
those. So I think intervening too much is also not the best strategy.
interesting.
Um, but exposing and sharing those values, I think, is important so
Yeah.
that you could keep a strong, unity as a family. And one thing that we decided to do this year, we're going to Uzbekistan. It's been like 9 years. I haven't
Nice.
been back. So it's the first time for my wife and my kids to go back. And instead of just
Your
telling
wife is
them,
Japanese, right?
exactly, yeah, instead of telling them about it, I just decided,
Show
why don't
them.
I just show it to them? Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, that makes sense. I think for the way I perceive it is like the sense of gratitude, like being able to teach that to a kid. Because one of my biggest fears for
Yeah.
me is like I work very hard. I genuinely want to become wealthy
Yeah.
and make sure my kid never has to worry and has all the doors open.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm also worried then like okay, how can it like how can she grow with that kind of sense of gratitude and understanding that this is unique and you should like try
Right.
really hard on everything you do because most people don't have that kind of luck. So it's the gratitude that I'm like really focused on like teaching. But I mean, my kid is 2 years old, so I have
Yeah.
time. You know.
I believe the best way you can teach your kid is by an example. If they see you working extremely hard and if they see you always taking care of things and caring for people, they will learn it naturally.
Mm, show by yeah, teach by example.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, awesome. And so basically, then at 18 years old, you make the decision to leave Uzbekistan, and your family stayed in Uzbekistan basically. And
Yeah, my family stayed in Uzbekistan, but then my brother actually went to Moscow. He studied in Moscow, and yeah, right now, to be honest, back home, I don't have my own place there anymore. So we are really like around the world. Me in Japan, my brother now actually lives in Netherlands.
interesting.
Yeah, so it's we're a global family these days.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Interesting. So basically, then you arrive in Japan. Like, I mean, there's so many countries though. Like, but still, Japan was the one that you felt like the most attracted by. Maybe like you mentioned the hardware, the science behind, like the quality of Japanese products. First job in Japan, a nightmare. Cup noodles and
Yeah.
things don't really work out.
Yeah, exactly. So the way I made a decision to come in Japan, there wasn't much information that I had. In 2005, I found out about Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University, and they opened their international campus in Oitaken. That was the only university you could apply based on English, and you don't have to speak a word in Japanese. However, the condition was that you come and you learn Japanese your first 2 years, but at the same time, you can take a curriculum, all the classes in
In
English.
English,
So
interesting.
that was super attractive.
Yeah.
Who would say no to an opportunity like this to come study in English and learn Japanese language at the same time? And the country was full of career opportunities after that. So only that was enough for me to make a decision and say, hey, you know what? I'm very hungry. I want to change in my life. And I asked my mom, I said, hey, there is an opportunity. I want to go. I got a scholarship, so I didn't have to pay for my tuition. However, when we
Mm,
have this pamphlet or a description of how much money you need to have monthly, I think it said like you need to have 700,000 Japanese yen per year to live in Japan comfortably, which is roughly like 60,000 to 70,000 Japanese yen per month. And that was a lot because back then the average salary would be 20 to 30,000 per month.
yeah. Wait, when that's like
That's
20.
2005.
Yeah, it's almost 20 years
Yeah,
ago.
that's almost 20 years ago. And that was a lot. So I had to make a deal with my mom. I took all her savings basically. And I told her, just give it to me. She had $7,000 that she put on a debit card. That was all life savings. That I said, okay, I'm gonna take it, but I'll hopefully return it back to you and give it to me. This will be enough, probably just for 1 year, and after 1 year, I'll figure out my own thing. And I was lucky. There were so many people that helped me out in Japan, and yeah, I never had to, ask for more than that.
Wow. How much pressure did you have? Like,
A lot of pressure.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that. Definitely, it was a lot of pressure. I felt like I have so much responsibility. I have almost like zero chance to fail because I made the decision myself.
Zero chance to succeed, you mean, or zero
Zero
chance
chance to fail.
to
Like
fail?
I
Failing is not an option.
exactly, yes.
Right.
Failing was not an option. And when I first proposed to my mom this idea to go to Japan, she said, you know what? Why don't you try a bit harder, get maybe better scores for TOEFL, and why don't you try next year for Germany? I'm like, where did Germany come from? Germany came from only because education in Germany is free. And she thought maybe I can get even a extra scholarship for a living stipend. So you don't actually have to work, and find the
Mm,
ways. I was like, no, my heart was already decided and I wanted to go. I didn't want to go to Germany.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, pressure does a lot of favors sometimes, right? Like when all you have to do is just keep going forward.
Exactly.
What were your ambitions back then? Like you said, you coming in, you go to Japan very hungry. Like what's in your mind? What's the definition of success back then? Like what does success look like?
The success as a high school kid who wants to
Yeah.
go to Japan was I wanted to make a lot of good connections and friends in school. I was very intentional about how I spent my first 6 months at school. I really wanted
For
to.
example, what did you do? Like that you like?
I would be asking random students walking on the campus, I'll be asking their names. And I'll be saying, hey, I'm Andrey, I'm from Uzbekistan, nice meeting you. That's how I met my first Mongolian friends, and they all thought I was Mongolian because I had very short haircut at that time. And that's how I made first Indian friends on campus by just introducing myself. And like it's like business development. You're knocking
Mm,
on the door because I really wanted to have a lively, well-connected friendships and connections when I was in Japan first.
yeah.
Yeah. The other part of what success looked to me when I was 18 years old at that time was learning the language as much as possible.
Mm,
I underestimated the difficulty of Japanese language. So I went to Russian school, and normally Russian teachers would teach the kids by saying that Russian is the most difficult language. It's the greatest language. I mean, I agree. A lot of great Russian literature was written by famous poets and novelists like Dostoevsky, for instance.
mm.
And that's the expectation I had. I thought I already speak the most difficult language. What could be more difficult than that? So that was my expectation. So I was a bit arrogant, maybe. And then I started learning and taking Japanese classes, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is just so difficult. So what we did, me and my friends, was at APU, they would be giving you 12 classes a week, intense Japanese a language course. Your first 6 months, you take 12 classes. Every day, you have at least 3 to 4
Wow.
classes a day. And after
Are those
classes are
classes
over,
taught in Japanese?
yes, they're taught
So
in
full, like the
Japanese.
whole everything is Japanese, full immersion.
90%,
Yeah.
90%. You'd be lucky if we had this teacher, Barwick Sensei. Her husband was Canadian. They lived in Canada for a long time, and she was teaching Japanese. We're lucky because she understood English. And when we
Yeah.
didn't understand the different Japanese grammar, we would ask her, "Can you tell us what it
Yeah.
is?" We're like, we don't come from like a Korean or Chinese background to understand it quickly, and she would help.
Yeah.
But 90% remaining
And
teachers, they would.
translators back then were not as good as they are now. Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So what we had to do is you go back to dormitory, you take a nap from like 5 to 6, you make a dinner, you have a dinner 6 to 7, then you go and study from like 8 until 1 or 2 a.m. just for Japanese studies only. So that
Mm,
was my first 6 months, but I really enjoyed it. I really wanted
yeah.
to learn the
I mean, those
language.
two aspects really put you up to success for life in Japan, right? Like a network and the language, like seems like the right kind of strategy to go
Yeah, I
for.
think language definitely is a big part of it. Being able to connect with Japanese audience, I think language
Mm,
is really important. But when I came to university, I knew because my senpais would tell me that Japanese is extremely hard. If you want to stay and work, basically success means whether you speak Japanese or not. And if you look at how Japanese companies hire or recruit people, especially foreigners, you told me that you work with a lot of like companies that are hiring foreigners.
yeah.
um, One of the definition of Yushu Najinzai, like a smart people, is whether you have N1 or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we did, job hunting in Japan, if you had N1 as a foreigner on your resume, that's a big deal. You
Yeah.
get a lot of invites for interviews.
Yeah, it's still now, to be honest. As soon as I meet people with N1, I'm like, wow, okay, this is the next level as a foreigner. It's like,
Yeah.
so you have N1, Andrew.
Yeah, I took N1 with a second attempt when I was back in college. I definitely failed it for the first time, but then
Yeah.
I had to do another 6 months of intense practice. And yeah, I finally got it.
But that's impressive. That's really impressive. Like, yeah, I'm stuck at N4, N3 maybe, just to not feel too bad here. But yeah, I wish I could spend more time on it. It's something. I hope now with my daughter that I will kind of catch up with her, I guess, because yeah,
Yeah.
it's my last chance, I would say. So then you got that first job. You hated it. You didn't get the opportunities you wanted. Robert Walter, a consultant, a friend of yours? Or how did you meet the consultant?
Yeah, I think to my first career, there are two sides of it. I don't want to it sound like the company was bad.
Hmm.
Very objectively, I think I was very young too.
Yeah.
I had this image of what I want to do and how fast I want to grow. I just got into a different world where I wasn't supposed to probably be in.
Mm.
And
It's also your first company in
it's my
Japan you're
first
working
company.
for, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I should have taken myself a bit easier and relaxed a little bit, take it slow, like don't rush, don't
Mm.
you're not going to become like a manager in 3 years or stuff like that, right? Like I also didn't have a lot of flexibility probably. I wanted
Mm.
growths. I saw that my other friends at other Japanese companies were doing great. They would be already in charge of APAC markets. They would
Uh,
fly to Europe. They would
you
be
comparing
selling.
yourself
Yeah.
with
And I would
them.
be comparing myself. And at that stage, it's not even about money because everyone is making exactly the same. Everyone makes 22 man yen. If you work for a Japanese company, that's a salary. And if you're lucky, you get a good bonus in summer and December. So I think it's two sides. One is the opportunity and the culture, and second is probably myself. I didn't have much flexibility and patience.
Mm.
And I started doing a search. And when you do a search, you do register with an agency. And this guy, whose name was Robert Perrier, he was a consultant at Robert Walters. He was extremely kind. I mean, with 1 year of experience, you don't get any job in Japan, especially if you want to get into a foreign company.
Mm. But you had
And
N1.
even with N1,
Yeah.
yeah, at that
So.
time, market for like youngsters like me wasn't good. Um, but he arranged, I think, couple interviews with foreign food manufacturing companies. I obviously graciously failed those interviews because they thought you're just young, you don't have any experience, and the reasons why you want to change the job they just don't make sense. And secretly, I was hoping that Robert would pitch Robert Walters to me
Mm.
because I did hear stories that if you are bilingual, you have some sales experience, you have energy, recruiting companies want you.
Yeah.
But he did not. And I felt desperate. I felt like, wow, I don't even deserve a pitch by Robert, but I really liked the way he works. his attitude. He truly wanted to help me out.
Mm.
I remember he would, wait for me until 7 p.m. to visit him in the office and do interview prep.
Wow.
And I fell in love with the job that he was doing. And I told him, Robert, I want to do exactly the same what you're doing. It's gonna sound as cliche as it is, but I told him I want to help people.
Yeah.
And that was my philosophy of why I got into recruiting business. And when I told about this to, I think it was Jeremy Sampson, he's the MD of Robert Walters now. I told him I want to help people, and he said, "Don't say that in your next interview."
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So
This is what I said during my first interview, and I got rejected right away.
I see.
So yeah, don't say that in your
Yeah,
first interview.
exactly. I'm pretty sure a lot of listeners are probably asking us why is
Yeah,
it so bad to say this?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but that got you in, Robert
That got
Walters.
me in, and I worked there for 4 years.
How was it in the beginning? Were you successful? Like,
It was. I only have positive memories of working as a recruiter in agency. My first year, it's another drama. I was almost fired because I wasn't able to bill.
mm,
I was a newbie on a very new chemical team back then. There were already like five consultants. And the reality is, no one is going to give you a juicy job and a juicy client to work.
mm,
Whether you are smart or not, you got to find your own client. The client I had was an R&D engineer role in Tochigi. That was my first role I had to fill. I was so desperate. I came every Saturday to do searches and looking into the pipeline of other senior consultants and almost like stealing those names and sending job descriptions to those people. I was very desperate, but with some hard work, miracle does happen, and I did fill that role. And I remember the fee was like 2.3 million or something. I found an engineer. His name was Takumi Shigeta. I still remember my first
yeah. We
placement's
all
name.
do. We all do.
Yeah, real guy from very well known GE Plastics, and he signed up, and that was my first placement. But 2.3 million for a large recruiting company is not enough.
Yeah.
So I struggled, and think I had almost like a verbal kind of warning, like, "Hey, mate, you need to do better.
Yeah.
Otherwise, management is not going to be happy with you."
Yeah.
So that lasted for around 3 quarters.
Did you struggle with maintaining the KPIs as well? Like,
Everything like KPIs, positions, BD, getting new customers, getting new clients. I think I was good at like with candidates,
I can
but
see that. Yeah.
like positions and filling those was really really hard.
Was it the sales aspect, like the constant hustle as well? Like,
To
well,
be very frank,
uh,
I think I didn't have attractive clients,
mm-hmm,
and I think when there was a reorg and a few senior consultants left the team, and after 7 months I became the most senior man on the team. That's when things started clicking.
you got all those clients
I got
basically
all
too.
the clients, and I monopolized, and I took the best positions, and then things started clicking.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really like recruitment is if you survive long enough, things will kind of start working in your favor
Yeah.
for that,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, I'm kind of in the other way. It was like I was my first company was N World. Struggled like I did really well actually, but I struggled to fit in. Like I couldn't fit into the I guess the Japanese workplace
Hmm. I see.
and yeah, I was not allowed to do BD for example in the beginning. And for me, I
Interesting.
was like, well, if I don't do BD, I don't have my clients, and if I don't have my clients, I cannot really be independent, and
I see.
that's a problem. So I struggled with that entire
Mhm.
aspect. So I left very early, went to S3, started my own desk, and that's where everything started to
I
work
see.
because I could pick my clients as well. And
Yeah. Yeah. You
so
had more freedom.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So you got given that desk in chemical, and it doesn't sound attractive at first already. Like I like I mean I do IT
Hmm.
and tech. It's so much easier to sell it basically. Right?
Yes, chemical industry had its pros and cons.
Mm,
The pro was that it's niche and not many competitors are doing it.
mm,
So we were one of the first probably chemical team doing it among foreign recruiting companies.
yeah.
The constraint is that the positions are very domestic, customers are domestic, and it's a very niche area where they're looking for a chemical engineer who understands polymers,
Mm,
plastics. And if you find somebody who is does like a chemist working for electronics, it's not gonna make any sense. So it's like a very niche
mm,
roles. But when you find the talent, things get much easier after that.
mm. So you grew, like your first year was a struggle, then you start getting more clients, and that's where your success start to ramp up.
Yes, I started really enjoying it. The environment was great. I got a lot of trainings directly from Jeremy, who is MD now at Robert Walters. He would do a lot of mock calls with me, BD calls, trainings. I would take him always for like client meetings, and I would really learn a lot. So I only have positive memories of that experience because I was learning
Yeah.
to do the job, and the most important thing for me was to get back my confidence that I lost during my first career. So I was very anxious about the second job, and I was taking it extremely seriously.
Mm,
There was again no option to fail, because I thought if you fail your second career, man, it's gonna be so stressful, and you'd probably be depressed, and you won't be able
mm,
to be successful.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now, and what's like, did you enjoy sales before you got into recruitment? Because the reason you got into recruitment is helping people, like you mentioned. But the reality is, like, most people with that reason will fail in recruitment, right?
I'll
Like,
be very honest.
uh,
Um, I tried to be as aggressive as possible because I saw there were very aggressive consultants who were constantly billing, closing, hardcore closure, making a really good revenue and the compensation. I tried to mimic that, and it never worked for me
why do you think so?
because I don't know. I just think it's not like my style and like my values at how to do the job.
Mm,
Although the role is sales, I think I had this fine tuned myself, my own style, and found like my own approach at how to do things. So I would never be like top one biller in the office. I would be somewhere like in top 10 a few
mm,
times. But I would also be probably a few consultants where you pretty much don't have any backouts.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So my billings were okay, but it's not like you are hiring 10 to 15 people
yeah.
consistently.
But you were sticking to your values as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just realized this doesn't work for me.
Yeah,
And the moment you start copying someone else's values, you just start failing.
yeah. This is personally one of the reasons I left the agency. Like, only good things to say as well about S3, but like, I didn't really like anymore the person I was becoming. Like, I was in the top billers, but I also was like looking at it and was like, man, I don't really like what I am here,
I
what I
see.
am becoming. And especially when I became a father, a lot of
Hmm.
things start to change. I was
I
like
see.
always like asking, like, will my daughter be proud
I see.
of the person that I am becoming? And
Yeah.
so that's now with InnoHyve, we're recruiting in such a different way, and
Hmm.
it's way more relaxed.
Uh-huh.
But so yeah, I can see that, like, being able to stick to your values, it's good for sustainable growth.
Yeah.
I can see that. So you stayed there about
4
4 or 5 years,
years.
4 years. What are the key skills that you learned there that then you took over to the next job?
I think the most fundamental skills in recruiting, understanding people, listening, building trust, caring for your client, um, staying in touch, following up. Those are the fundamental things. I still do exactly the same thing day on day that I was doing
Yeah.
12 years ago. I think those are really, really good basics that a good agency can teach you. The other lessons that I learned is I think sales is hard, recruiting is hard. It's extremely difficult job, especially to do it in Japan for a Japanese market. When you're
Mm,
working with Japanese candidates, they have extremely high expectations. Um, I think that also taught me that it's not an easy job, and when you do it well, you do feel that you're adding value.
Yeah.
So I think it taught me a lot about importance of work ethics and resilience. I don't really like the word resilience because it does give me goosebumps, to be honest. It's hard to be resilient 100%,
Mm,
but I think it does teach you how to deal with stress and pressure
yeah.
and how not to give up during those
Yeah. The
times.
rejection as well is
Rejections.
huge.
Oh, yeah.
Like I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
Rejection is something I still cannot get used to. It's painful.
It's yeah, like I'm lucky. I did door-to-door sales for a while.
Okay.
So rejection is like super hard. Like people, you see literally their faces, you know. And
Yeah.
recruitment's like
Yeah.
cold calling, or you like you can really kind of step away from it and say, well, that person really doesn't know me. But in door to door, that person's in front of you,
I
slamming the
see.
door in front of you.
I see. Literally door to door.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've been through that. I did I was in shopping malls as well with a kiosk stopping people.
Hmm.
And that kind of rejection is really, really painful. So for me, recruitment was like, wait, that's fine. Like people rejecting me on the phone or through LinkedIn, like I can
That's
deal with
awesome.
that.
No, for me,
Oh,
yeah, it's not as painful as it used to be before, like when you're fresh and you don't know, but I still do feel like there is an ego involved, and like after you put so much effort, you're trying to do a proper job, and you get a rejection, it is still
yeah.
painful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I can tell. It's not easy. It's never easy. Like after Robert Walters, you went to Google.
Yes.
That's insane, right? Like, I mean, your family must be so proud when that happens. Like Google is such a name. Like,
Yeah, I think so. Like when I got an offer, my mom, she called up like the department. There were like 30 people in her department, and she invited all of them, and then did a small party.
yeah,
It's really funny. But yeah, I think everyone was super surprised about it. But then, you know, before I actually applied, my mom was visiting me in Japan and I
mm,
told her about it, but she didn't really know much about Google.
interesting.
And she literally asked me, "Is this a cool company?" I'm like, "Of course. Don't you know about all this, you know, IT technologies and different products the company does? Oh, is this the Google company?" I'm like, "Yeah, it is." And then yeah, when I got an offer, she was extremely happy. I think I
Mm.
was also very happy about it too.
What did you learn at Google, and what was the difference between agency recruitment and like in-house recruitment?
Yeah, the reason I left recruitment was because I felt like I'm not using my brain anymore and I'm not learning much, and everything almost is like on autopilot. And I
Mm,
wanted to really find a place where I can be intellectually challenged. And Google was one of the companies that was hiring an internal team. The first member that was hired there, I think, is Iwana, who was also at Robert Walters. And when I first joined, we had a party, a farewell party for her. Everyone was congratulating her into getting to the Google role. And then the second person from Robert Walters was a friend, Nick Sugawara, and he was referred by Iwana, and he got in. So the moment I saw his LinkedIn page changed, I was blown away with an idea that you could get into this successful company
mm,
and be a part of it, you know. So the moment I saw his LinkedIn page change, I texted him. I said, "Hey, Nick, I want to meet you." And he invited me to Google's office, and we had an amazing lunch there. And he told me that they were hiring, and if I want, he would refer me.
nice.
How could I say no to that? So that's basically what happened.
The importance of always developing relationships and
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And being really quick.
yeah, 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 yeah. What did you learn at Google? Like, because I think at first glance, I look at it from an agent perspective who'd never done in-house recruitment, but it sounds like very easy. If you recruit for Google, it sounds like okay, everyone knows Google, it's such a brand. But I'm sure it's not that easy because you know, like they need recruiters in the end. And like, what did you learn, and what kind of things surprised you in there? What kind of challenges did you face?
Yeah. there were many challenges. I don't know, like I'm reflecting back, it seems like every step in my life I do is like a drama. There is a big challenge that I'm fighting for and I'm trying to overcome. Google was similar. When I first joined, I didn't feel comfortable myself there. I questioned myself whether I do belong to this group of
Like
people.
imposter syndrome, kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I had my first imposter syndrome, like really, really big scale, where you are forcing yourself to go to the office. It's crazy, right? It's the best company. So I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't understanding what's going wrong. Free food, amazing colleagues, smart people,
Yeah.
um, the best culture, the best place to work. Everyone is so professional and polite. Um, but I was feeling anxious. I was feeling maybe I was wrongly hired and I'm not
Mm.
supposed to be here. So that lasted for around 6 months. I had my first kid at that time. I just got married. I joined Google in April and I had my marriage in May.
Wow.
And then after 8 months, I had my first baby. So it was a lot and I had to perform and I didn't know if I'm performing well or not. So a
Mm.
lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty. So the biggest learning was for me to overcome the psychological state and truly believe in myself again that I have a purpose. I made a decision. I
Mm.
want to come here and I want to be one of the best in this company. So that was my inner voice that I was fighting myself. Um, the way I overcame imposter syndrome, it's because you're in a new company, you can't actually talk loudly that you're struggling. It's extremely hard to go to your manager and say, "Hey, I'm struggling, I think I'm failing," because you're in a new company, you want your promotion, you
Yeah.
want to do well, you want to be seen as you're doing well, and you're
And you're
not
surrounded by excellence, right?
you're
Everyone's
surrounded by
amazing.
really excellent people.
Mm.
Everyone spoke a very good English, a lot of native English speakers, and I felt like I never had to speak up, ask questions during the meetings, do presentations, and all that. And I'm not a native English speaker neither. So it was all very difficult for me. And again, I was taking things seriously again.
Mm.
So yeah, I struggled a lot. Like I had to learn things in a really hard way. But then I
Mm.
started making some friends and I started opening up myself. Then a lot of hard work was paying off. I'll tell you, I was working from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. And because I had a kid, I would go and have dinner with the family, and then I will log back at around 8 p.m. and I would almost work until 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. That was
Wow.
almost like first year was like that. That was my schedule. I would go back to sleep at around 2 a.m., wake up at around 8, and go to office by 9 again. I just wanted to, prove myself again that I can bear results
Mm.
and I can do it.
Why did you feel so, I guess, unconfident? Because you were doing okay at Robert
I
Walters, and
was.
but yeah, why in
Because
hindsight,
it's a
like,
different world, it's a different system,
yeah,
it's a different level of expectations, and people who are like, I don't know, Harvard Business School grads or like all these Todai people, people who went to best universities in Japan. There,
yeah,
a lot of people who are with international backgrounds. They were born and raised in US, came back to
it
Japan,
was the
went to.
people basically.
I think
Yeah.
people is
Because
definitely
in
one.
agencies, you have those English teachers. You have a lot
Yes,
of people from different
exactly.
backgrounds that
Yeah,
don't necessarily have it all figured out before they get their
exactly.
first job. Okay, that
Right,
makes sense.
right.
Got it.
But
I
then
can see
again,
why.
I went back and I started reflecting back and I asked myself a question. Man, you wanted this. Have it now. And again, there is no way back.
Mm.
So I just had to figure it out and I just
I mean,
had
in
to
that
fight
case,
it.
there is always a way back, actually, right? This is just your mindset then that allows you
There is
to
always
push
a way
yourself,
back, that
right?
is right. But then it's scary to think you got in and you're living this. amazing company where
Yeah,
everyone is supposed to have fun, and you're
yeah.
going back.
And you'll disappoint your wife as well at the
Yeah, you
time, and
disappoint your mom. Probably
yeah,
that's the biggest one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow. But
So
then
so yeah.
eventually you got successful there as well.
Yeah, I think so. I really enjoyed my 6 years there. The other learning is, I think you just make it yourself. A lot of times we expect something from others, we expect something from the companies. I think now I reflect back and I think it's really in your hands what you do with all of that. You have all the resources, you have all the capabilities, just make it or live. I think that it's as simple as it is.
Betting on yourself, basically.
Exactly, betting on yourself. There's no one else to rely on. You have to do it all yourself. If you really want, like, I
Mm.
was extremely pushing myself a bit too much. To be honest, I saw a lot of highly performing individuals who were promoted within.
How are you evaluated as an internal recruiter? That's actually something I don't know.
Yeah, the evaluation system is a bit tricky, but then at the end of the day, it's the impact that you create. It could be evaluated by the projects you do, the problems you solve, the new systems that you implement, and obviously the number of hires that you make.
Mm.
It's a candidate experience is something that they also look into. A lot of metrics, not to an extent as agency.
Yeah.
There are no like micromanagement type of KPIs, but they do evaluate you
Because you're
every
building a
quarter.
culture as well, right? Like that's probably the main difference.
Building a culture, not at that size of Google, it was already
It was
pretty big in
already,
Japan.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Interesting. And from Google you went directly to Applied Intuition, or?
that's right. Yes.
And I guess that's where you had to build a culture, and like you were very
Yes,
early there. Like,
exactly.
what
That's
were the main challenges transitioning from, I mean, a huge company like Google, very well renowned, to Applied Intuition, which back then most people didn't know, right?
yeah.
So
I think even still within our domain, we are obviously getting more popular now.
yeah,
But if you ask my father-in-law or my father-in-law's friends, do you know Applied Intuition? They'll probably
right.
not know. They all know what Google is. Biggest challenge. The reason, first of all, why I left
Mm.
Google as a recruiter at Google, I always questioned myself. When I got comfortable, when I got confident, when I got a couple promotions, I started feeling and questioning, would I ever be able to recruit for a company that is not Google, that has no branding, that is not known at all to the Japanese audience? And when I saw many people working at small SaaS companies like Box, Notion, I don't know, let's say, well, Snowflake
Mm.
several years ago when no one knew about Snowflake, for instance. And when I
Yeah,
was seeing those recruiters going to those companies instead of coming to Google when we tried to, recruit them, I always admired them. I was like, wow, you have to be so brave to be able to do this. And I was questioning myself, would I ever be able to do that myself or not? So I was getting very comfortable with the company, and it was time to learn something new, do something new in a very different environment, things that I've never done before. And
mm.
that was the biggest motivation for me. Like, after you do recruiting 10 years, it's not that much for you to
Right.
learn. So I had to really change the environment. And startup was the only like choice. You either do your own business, like what you're doing now at InnoHyve. You're creating value for your customers. You're doing it all on your own, or but that's also scary. I wouldn't be able to do that after Google,
Maybe
right?
that's the next challenge for you then.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. Who
Yeah.
knows? Never say no. Never say never. So
Nice.
that was the biggest motivation to join a startup. I wasn't interested in another GAFA or FANG type of a company to do
Right.
to do exactly the same for a little bit more money. So
When you joined Applied Intuition, was it as challenging as expected?
very much, even more than what I expected. But my expectations were very low. I prepared myself. It was during COVID.
Oh wow.
So here's another drama. I was building a house. I just applied for a mortgage loan.
Mm.
It's COVID. Now I have two kids. Everyone is at home. Schools are closed. And I'm deciding that I'm leaving the company and joining this unknown startup. And yeah, I told about this to my wife, and she said, "I think you should do that."
She believes in you. She trusts you.
Yeah, I think she's been a really big support for
Because
me.
I think like a lot of wives in that situation will be like, no, you're crazy. Like worst timing ever,
Yeah,
Andre.
yeah. The timing was not great.
Yeah, it
It's
sounds like terrible.
yeah,
Sounds
it's
like a
work
terrible
from
timing.
home.
Yeah.
Market is not great neither.
Yeah, I mean
It's
everyone was
COVID.
scared. Like, yeah, I
Yeah,
was like, what is going on? Like,
exactly.
yeah. Wow. And so you got there, like what were like the first months like what were the first challenges you had
You
to
know
kind of
what?
take care
The
of?
first day I went to Otemachi office, and the first thought when you're coming out of the elevator, I said, "You made a career mistake. Why did you have to leave such a comfortable place
Mm,
and join an unknown startup that no one knows?" And I was like, "Can I go back?"
cold feet syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. That was another syndrome that I was experiencing that lasted for maybe like 45 minutes. And I got in, I met people, we had lunch. I remember I ordered curry rice. I was not enough portion. I felt still hungry, and I was again remembering the Google lunches we had in the cafeteria. Everything was coming back to me, and yeah. But then again, okay, so that was the first day,
Yeah.
and then I went back home. I was so tired because I wasn't using my brain that much. You had to learn a lot, and at Applied Intuition, we have a really robust training where you have to read a lot, you have to watch a lot of different recordings, videos, and get to speed. It's like there's an onboarding document where you have a lot of tasks that you need to do, and you just need to have this cognitive capability to
Mm,
um, digest all that information. And then on my first day, when I had one-on-one with manager, I asked him, "So when do I get to recruit?" And I was expecting he would say, "Well, get trained first, maybe next week, next couple of weeks," right? That's a default answer. Get to know people. He said, "Tomorrow." And I said, "Okay, do I get my license then today?" He's like, "Yes, you already have it. Go for it." So from day two, I started sourcing on
wow.
LinkedIn for Korea roles. And the interesting thing is that at Google, my past 4 years, first 2 years, I was doing 360. I was sourcing myself, 360, taking care of the whole recruiting process. But then we got very spoiled. There was a huge team of sourcers, there was a huge team of contractors. I didn't have to source a single day for the past 4 years. I
Mm,
had amazing people that would partner with me, and they would source the best candidates. And sourcing is the most difficult part,
it is,
where
yeah.
you have to really catch the best talent. And I haven't done it for a long time.
The tools have changed a lot as well.
Yeah, the tool has changed, but for the better.
Yeah.
So they became more simple. And you know what? I reached out to around 50 people, and no one came back to me. And at that moment, I felt, "You're an idiot. Why did you have to change?" I had doubts again. I was like, "Am I able to do this again? Why did I have
Mm,
to change? Why am I being so uncomfortable?" But then I realized I was just very, very uncomfortable.
and that's what you wanted.
That's what I wanted. And
Yeah.
I reminded myself again, this is exactly what you wanted. You were very uncomfortable. You wanted this growth. You wanted this pain. So go and take it. So I
Mm,
had to shut up again and do the work. And, when you work hard, you put all the effort, you do get to see the results. So or I guess at that time it was just me. Um, I think I hired around 10% of the whole company.
yeah.
The company was around 600 people, and I think I hired around 60 people
All in
in total
Japan or some other overseas?
in Japan, Korea, and
Right.
Germany.
You hired for the Japan office, Korean office, and Germany. So the time difference was also pretty annoying probably
Exactly.
back then.
Yes. Yeah. Well, basically, all I did was working a lot of hours. You know, recruiting is not easy, but I enjoyed it. I
Mm,
enjoyed to be in the field. I enjoyed making direct impact, working with CEO, CTO, all the senior managers in the US,
mm,
everyone in Japan, Korea. So it's a lot of fun. And one thing that I learned is whether you become senior manager or you become a head of department or something, like one of the values I learned in this company is the importance of being very hands-on. I think it's super important for like any leader to be able to, do the hands-on work.
yeah.
I think that's really what
Why
keeps you
do you think
relevant,
so?
because that's what keeps you relevant. And when you're becoming a senior person, you're managing team. That's the easiest to get respect from the team members.
Yeah.
Who wants to work with a leader who doesn't understand the problem and doesn't know how to solve the problem, but tells you what to do? That's the worst.
Yep. This is one of the main reasons I left the agency side
I see.
because managers didn't bill, and I have a very hard time to listen to them telling
Yeah,
me how to
yeah.
bill while
But
they
it's
were
not
not
only
billing.
agency. I think in a lot of enterprise
Yeah,
companies,
absolutely.
that's how the work is done, right?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I agree. And I think the bigger the company gets, at some point, things just get there where you cannot be that hands-on anymore, but still being able to show to people that you are in the position you are because you know how to do the job is important, right? Having those moments to
Absolutely.
showcase.
Yeah.
What else did you learn at Applied Intuition? Because I mean, you left Google for that extra challenge,
Yeah.
that extra knowledge. What else did you kind of learn from that challenge that you will not have been able to learn
Of
at
course.
Google?
On recruitment side,
Yeah.
I would say when you have a very well designed recruiting process, when you have a really strong team behind you that you're orchestrating, and people are invested in recruiting and they want to hire the best people that are available in the market, you don't need to have a Google brand. You can do
Mm,
that. And top talented people will recognize it. People at the end of the day, they make decisions. Compensation is important,
yeah.
products, technology is important, but at the same time, I think a lot of us make decisions based on who am I going to work with? What am I going to learn from these people that I'm going to spend 10 to 12 hours of my day? So the doubt that I had about myself, whether I can do it at a different company at a smaller scale with no branding, I validated. I think it is possible. So for
Nice.
a lot of like listeners, hiring managers who are maybe struggling to hire people, you have to think about recruiting as a strategic business function that supports the growth of the company. If you get to that mentality and you align your values and you align your organization towards that, where everyone is investing time into interviewing candidates, selling the company, closing the candidates, you can win. You can
Mm,
overcome any competition that is out there.
recruitment should be part of the culture, basically.
Absolutely. And that's how it is positioned within our organization. And that's why I joined this company, because I wanted to work for a company where hiring and recruiting is truly valued and brings impact.
Mm. The headquarter of Applied Intuition is in Silicon Valley, right?
Correct. Mountain View.
Is that mentality of, recruitment in the culture, is it more something that you see in Silicon Valley compared to like in Japan or like, because you've seen it both, right?
Yeah.
Like the hiring, like,
Yeah. I think companies in Silicon Valley, they are way more hungry. It's all execution based. Strategy is important, but it's
hungry
all
what,
about
for speed, talent, or like,
for everything,
yeah.
especially so for recruiting, because recruitment equals revenue. If you don't bring the key people into your organization, you're not gonna make revenue. It's not only about bringing salespeople; it's bringing engineers. Like if you get a project with a large customer and you're telling them we're gonna build this for you in 6 months, you better have a really good talented people who can build the product and
Mm.
ship it, and you have the sales organization that can deliver. So that's why recruiting is so important. And I think there are a lot of companies that are constantly complaining that it is difficult to hire and find people. Yes, it is. But if you're not spending enough time, and if you are not, thinking of recruitment as a strategic organization to support the business, you're not going to get there.
Mm.
So it's not a secret. It is possible to bring and build strong, talented teams.
Among all the hires you've done so far, how much are you getting supported by agencies, recruitment agencies?
I would say around 10%.
10%.
Yeah.
You're smashing your job because this is your job basically, right? It's to make sure
This is my
that
job. Yeah, I
avoid
signed up
using.
for the company. I didn't sign up for a job where I'm managing agencies. I
Yeah,
knew it would be impossible to just focus on agencies, and especially in Japan.
nice. So you're competing against the whole rec- agency market as well, basically on daily basis.
Yeah, I think so. But I believe agencies do help
Mm,
us as well, because there are a few nice agencies that understand the requirements. I understand our culture, and they're trying to do their best.
yeah,
But the volume is obviously much small, and our volume of hiring is also not like 100 people every year.
of course.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's a reasonable.
yeah. How hard is it then for you as well? Because there's such a scarce in the market. You have to be quick, but you also have to maintain culture. You guys have a pretty long interview process.
Interview process is actually, it's intense, but
Yeah,
it is not long.
it's not long. Okay,
Yeah.
like,
So I guess your question is, how do you balance those different things?
yeah,
And there's a
the
big
speed versus
scarcity.
quality, the quality versus
Yeah.
quantity. Like,
I think one is, again, very well designed hiring process. We have a very well prepared questions. We try to understand the background of candidates. The interview process is designed in a way where we have core interviews where we do 4 back-to-backs on the same day.
wow,
Everyone submits their feedback on the same day. I can communicate the result to the candidate on the same day or the next day, and then we move forward to the final 45 minutes final interview. And if that goes well, I get an approval within 24 hours.
wow,
And basically, next day after the final interview, I can prepare an offer letter and share it on the call to the candidate. I got my offer within a week. Within 1 week, I had 7 different conversations. I had 5 official interviews and 3 non-official, actually 8 total meetings in 1 week. And I had my first conversation with my hiring manager on
Mm.
Saturday, our time, and I signed the next week, Saturday.
Why can't every company out there not work like that?
Because not every company is prioritizing recruiting and interviewing and spending a lot of hours into this. It's mendoksai. Not many people want to be spending hours of interviews.
Mm.
Every hiring manager out there wants to find a stellar profile, interview, and hire. But to get to that, you need to spend a lot of time filtering and meeting candidates. It's not only interviews, it's selling the company, answering to all
It's
these
not
different
just having a
questions.
brand as well.
Exactly. And if you don't have that mentality in your organization, you're not going to get there.
That might be probably the biggest learning aspect for you at your current situation then, right? It's like
Exactly.
it's not just about your branding, it's really about
Yeah. So when I came here, even with my Google experience, I think Google interview process was good. It's
yeah.
a good company, and they do hire great people. But when I came here, and I was feeling like it's a different planet.
Mm.
I felt like I was way more supported by my team. By the way, 99% of them are all in Silicon Valley, different time zone. And I was way more supported by them than I was working here locally. Well, where you have local team members. So that's just a different culture and mentality and the speed. You
Yeah.
you post something and everyone comes back to you. They're eager to help you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the speed happens if everyone is involved, right? You,
Exactly.
I think that's
Yes.
really
It's a
key
team
here.
sport.
It's the speed only happens if everyone is involved because that's the number of times I see I will work with clients of mine. and one person in the process slow, and now everything is slowed down, and
Exactly.
the candidate is mad, like he keeps asking
Yeah,
for feedback, and
that's
it's like
right.
one or two people
Yeah,
sometimes in the process. Meanwhile, all the rest understands. But yeah, it's part of the culture.
absolutely.
Yeah. One of the last topics I want to kind of touch with you about is AI. Like, how do you believe at some point you will get to a point where recruiters are not needed anymore, that AI can fully automate like the recruitment process?
Good question. I would probably refuse to comment on this because we are yet to see what's going to happen, and it's extremely difficult for me to say because I'm not in this space
Mhm.
in terms of like AI in recruitment. So I simply don't know what the right answer is. Maybe AI may replace a lot of work that we do today. Will they replace us completely? I'm not sure. I think there is still a lot more to see.
Mhm.
So I'll just leave it that way in terms of AI.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel the same. I feel like
Yeah, what do you
the
think?
very transactional recruiters will not be there anymore.
I
Like
see.
that will have to disappear. But I think everyone will have to step up, and the value proposition that agencies will have to give to their clients will have to be bigger and bigger, and like supporting them more, support the clients more on the PR side of things, you know, like give true exposure to your clients, like treat them as a growth partner, not just as, you know, someone buying candidates from you. I feel like I mean, that's why I'm starting this whole, you know, Hive
Yeah.
platform as well,
Mm,
because I see like the tools are getting so good, like LinkedIn is so good, like,
yeah.
and often clients pay for something that they don't really realize how easy actually it
Mm-hmm.
was.
Mm,
But they have to pay for an average, right? They pay for the hundreds of CVs being sent and never being placed. And I think that's gonna change. Like
I
the
see.
good recruiters still are very, you know, precise. They send quality. So I think we still have time. We still should have
Yeah.
a job for a while.
Yeah.
Um, because in the end, if everyone uses AI, the candidate being hunted or being, you know, scouted still doesn't know which decision to make, right? The AI just cancel itself out, I think.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, quality will have to raise drastically, I think, in terms of service.
If AI helps us, sorry, if AI and technology will help to raise the recruiting bar, I'm for it. I
No.
think it's a good challenge. It's really good for customers, clients, for candidates. I think that's a move that we probably need in recruiting now.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think you and I are on the same. When it comes to we love recruitment. So, like I love recruitment, and for me,
Hundred
I
percent.
really enjoy watching the service getting better, like the experience of the candidate getting better, experience of the client getting better, and less waste. One of the frustrations I had before the way I was recruiting before was so much wasted energy, so much
Right.
wasted conversation, so much wasted time, basically in general. And I
Yes.
feel like AI will kind of really help solve that negative aspect of recruitment. Andre, we are a little bit tight on time here, so I want to finish up with some rapid fire questions. So those are questions to
If
which you
so,
answer in a
okay.
very rapid way. If you could have dinner with any entrepreneur, dead or alive, who will it be?
I would love to have a dinner with David Ha. He is the founder of Sakana AI. I would love to, I think, understand him a bit more and ask some of these AI related questions to him. The
Yeah.
second person in Japan would probably be Son Masayoshi,
Wow.
the chairman of SoftBank. Obviously, he's a legend. I
Yeah, that will be an
think,
interesting one.
yeah.
Interesting, David. I mean, that should be possible. I feel like.
Well,
Yeah.
let's see.
He must be very busy these days, but yeah. I mean, we would love to have him on the podcast as well. Just saying. Yeah.
Yeah, you should invite him and see what
Absolutely.
happens.
Like we should. If you could only give one piece of career advice, what would it be?
One piece of career advice is
Mm,
the best career advice I got from Iwana, who was at Google. And she told me the best career development is when you raise your hand and do the most difficult thing that no one wants to do.
couldn't agree more. I love to focus on what people don't want to do. I agree with that. Your favorite secret spot in Japan to relax with your family?
My secret spot, my heart still belongs to Beppu, Oitaken. That's where my university days were spent. So I always think about that place.
Uh, Maybe a famous dish of Uzbekistan?
Definitely plov.
Plov? What's plov?
You should Google it.
Yeah.
It's a traditional dish made of rice and meat. It's something that Uzbek people can eat every day.
Are you eating it in Japan?
I make it sometimes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Most impactful book you ever read?
Most impactful book. It's really hard to name. But I would probably recently go for *Sapiens*
Nice.
by Yuval Harari,
Yeah.
The Brief History of Humankind.
Yeah, very good one. What's the kindest thing someone has ever done for you?
I think everyone probably agree that would be giving a birth to a child.
Nice.
So my birth.
Love it. You're the first one saying that, actually. I love
Interesting.
it. Yeah, I love that. The best advice you have ever received?
The best advice. The best advice was follow your values and you'll find a way.
Seems that's what you've been doing so far, and
Looks like
seems to work.
a lot of drama, a lot
Yeah,
of struggle and suffering, but yeah, it's been working so far.
love it. Andrey, thank you so much. It was a great episode. I
Thank you
hope we
very
can have you
much.
again with a little bit more time because there's a lot of things I
Absolutely.
want to talk about
Let's do
today.
that.
But thank you. Token of our appreciation as well is please keep our mug.
Oh,
We love to.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrey.
Thank you.
Pleasure.